Welcome, everyone, to another broadcast of The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst radio network. All past broadcasts are podcasts. Pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. We welcome your questions and comments. Please use DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now here they are. It's Michael and Margaret Lyons.
And thank you very much, D-Man. I am Michael Lyons.
And I'm Margaret.
And in all humility, good evening. Well, tonight's show is about those who have no humility, in one sense.
Well, yes, it's a kind of a sad state of affairs, frankly.
We should introduce it properly. Tonight will be the third in our prison series, and it's probably starting to feel like a prison out there for you folks who are listening, isn't it? And this is called The Prison of Narcissism. Mm-hmm. So now you go ahead, give it a whirl.
Me?
Well, I mean, you were going to say, it's a sad state of affairs, and it is.
Well, yes. Narcissism in general is the overriding concern with yourself. Pretty much the story of Narcissus himself is a good example.
Narcissus. Right.
Narcissus, excuse me.
Yes.
Where he's falling in love with his self-image. And it's a Greek story. Mm. And back then, they didn't have mirrors. So he saw his reflection in a pool of water and promptly fell in love with himself. Mm. To the point of obsession.
Definitely obsession.
So he pretty much stayed at that pool and didn't want to leave.
And today we see a great deal of narcissism in our modern society, and in kind of in line with these prison series that we're talking about. We talked about in the first of them, which was the prison of the mind, and we talked about dogma and rules, because the ego loves its rules.
Right.
But the ego also loves its reflection. It loves itself. And we're probably all familiar with the voice in your head which judges yourself. It says, I don't like whatever about me. I don't like the way my height. I don't like the job I have. I don't like the way my voice sounds. I don't like the way my body looks. And you can even say, I hate myself, to get down into the clinical kind of presentation of this. But who, and this is really from Tolle, but it's who is doing the judging? Who's doing the observing? Who is the I who hates themselves? It's a very odd sort of personality split.
Right.
But this is what the ego wants. The ego needs two things. It needs the other, and it needs to find fault and to put itself in the position of judgment and righteousness, and put the other in the position of lack and of incorrectness and needing to be better, greater. And it does that a lot to others, to that things that are outside of itself. This one's wrong, that one's wrong, I'm right. And that's kind of the dogma and rules part of it. But when it starts to talk about itself, it's not a mirror like Narcissus has, or like what you have on your bathroom wall, but it has a mirror. It has a self-image. And in certain clinical situations, where we have body dysmorphia or sexual dysmorphia, or all these various eating disorders and all these other things, that self-image is so distorted that you can lead yourself into sickness or lead yourself into all types of mental illness, because your self-image is so judged to be incorrect and wrong. that you'll starve your body to the point of emaciation and death.
Well, first of all, you've separated yourself into two different pieces, which is really odd. Okay. You're not who you actually are. You have a concept of who you are. And when you say, I like myself, which is a very interesting statement because there's an I and there's a myself, which means there's two from that statement. And the myself is the concept that the I has put together. And you sit there and you wonder, who is this I that makes this concept? You know, because the myself is actually an object. It's a creation. It's not a living being.
That's such a great point. You really need to emphasize that because that's exactly correct.
The being an object is literally you're a thing. You're not you, and the I that's dictating this thing. Very few people look at it to say, well, who is this I? And it's an interesting self-reflection when you begin to ask these questions. Because most people say, well, that's me. It's like, well, no, you've actually, at this point, asking this question of who is this I, have now divided yourself into three parts.
One of which is sane.
The one asking the question, right, which is trying to understand, okay, what's going on here. The I that's decided that it gets to dictate the rules. You know, I choose the game, and if I don't like it, then the rest of you have to suffer. And then myself part, which is this product of something that was decided upon solely by this one piece that wants to make the decisions. And you to literally step back and observe this. It's like, wait.
What's going on here?
I don't like myself. Who is this I that's not liking? And what is this myself that
is not being liked? May I expound on that a little bit?
Sure.
See, the myself, you said it exactly correct, but I just want to kind of, this is really important. The myself is a made-up thing. It's truly made. And it's made, and it's also judged. It's a creation. And people can have many myselves. I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other thing. And the relationship of the I that's making the myself and its judgment of them and whether they're good enough, and they almost never are, or whether they're good enough, is an objectification, an artificial splitting, and then a voice. There's a persona here which judges the myself. Now the myself talks back. You can say, well, I hate this about you. And the myself, well, we couldn't do anything about it. And you'll have this whole long, dialogue going on. Many people, right?
Arguments, self-argument.
They have a self-argument going on in their head, and then if it breaks out into the open, all of a sudden you think, well, what are they ranting on about? Because they've had a whole full build-up internally between the I and the myself, and the argument or the diatribe or the dialogue that's going on here. Now, these myselves, you can find analogies of them in today's current social media and a lot of the video games. You make these me's. You make a me. Well,
let's call them the faces that you use.
The faces that you use, but then there's also these kind of, you'll construct these avatars. That's the other good word for them, these avatars. And within your head, these games and these social media constructs are attractive because they're analogs of what the ego is doing inside the head. They're kind of putting the ego outside and letting it play with more physical things. But within the head, there is this whole kind of mechanism, this churning mechanism of creating the myself and perfecting the myself and having these dialogues with the myself about how good you are, how bad you are. These myselves and the I that looks at them critically are what the Narcissus story is based upon. Narcissus externalizes this whole process of falling in love with, or in essence also finding fault with, the myself, the reflection, and the energy that the I gathers from having all the different dialogues with the myselves is where this whole thing goes wrong. And in narcissistic behavior, and in the prison of this narcissism, the ego, the I, reigns sort of supreme. It puts itself in the enviable position of being able to judge all of its myselves and all of its various personas.
Well, the interesting thing is, the person that asks the question, who is this I and who is the myself, has allowed that part to take the initiative and do things, to make those decisions. And you have to think back on, when did all this start?
That's a good reflection, too.
This part of me that is making all these decisions, when did I give it permission to do that? Because it needs the permission of your consciousness to be able to be in that forefront position and engage with the consciousness of you as well as the consciousness of others. Ideally speaking, your consciousness is supposed to be interacting with other people's consciousness. And the problem with it is, of course, that we are human and we are not perfect, and we have been hurt by other people. So there's a part that basically says, well, I know how I can prevent being hurt again. The ego steps in and says, I can judge. I can judge for you so you don't get hurt. And frankly, the hurt part of you is like, okay, I'll go along with you, okay. And it sort of works and sort of doesn't, depending upon what it is that you are trying to avoid.
That's a very I think that's a very astute observation, that the early on in your life, whether it's from trauma, which is what you're talking about, or just well-meaning others, they instill or you instantiate, one or the other, this ego. And it's early on. It's quite early on. There's sometimes is the concept of referring to the age of reason as being about 7 years old or so, and maybe coincident with that or prior to that, but still, after the period of time when you're truly an innocent, maybe 2 or 3, you don't have this ego voice, and then it kind of, either you gather it from others, or as you said, through some sort of trauma, it becomes this, well, all they want you to do is X, Y, Z. So I'll help you do that. I'll create you a me, and this me will be the me that they want to see, and that'll keep you from getting hurt, or it'll keep you from, it'll please people. It'll get you things. So the ego is a great tradesman. It says, if we look like what they want and we do what they're asking for, they're going to give us cookies. It's going to be great. So the ego loves this kind of being in charge, and in essence, pushing down, and the other kind of, you mentioned it already, the other kind of Faustian bargain here that happens with the ego is it doesn't remain as just a tool. It says, I'll help you, but it really means is I'll take charge. I'll identify, I'll be the actual me. The actual voice in your head is like, I'm the actual thing that's running the ship. I'm Plankton in my Planktonmobile. I'm at the top. And all the personae, and there can be many, are creations of the ego, and they're identifications of the ego, and it slips in and out of them like masks, one to the next.
You mean the myselves?
The myselves, the me's,
Mm-hmm.
the other pieces of you, which the ego says, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I do like this, and I don't like that. You know, I want to be this, and I want to be that, and if only this, and if only that. You know, these me's, which are sort of its little army of reflections, are inspected on a constant basis, not daily, not hourly. It's constant, and it's never ending. If you're in this, if your consciousness is beset by the I and all of its me's, all of its myselves, it's a cacophony, and it can become, as Tolle says, you know, you are the sky, and the sun shining in it. And all these egos and I's and me's are clouds and storms and things that just get in the way of the sunshine, of the vastness of you. You are the vastness. You contain all of it. You are the sunshine. You are the light. None of those things can exist outside of consciousness, and they know it. And they know it, and they want to conceal it from the being that is you.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to both cloud and gather as much power and as much control, and this is Margaret's great point, as they're allowed to have. The me and the I and all the me's, the I and all the creations, all the personae, all the masks, all of that stuff is still within and under the absolute dominion of the consciousness. And it's only the ego which will tell you that you cannot get rid of it because it's essential.
Right.
You can't get rid of me.
Well,
I'm essential.
The first thing it says is, well, I'm a part of you.
I'm a part of you.
And and it's trying to convince you it's the main part of you.
It is you. People will say, well, that's, as you just said in the beginning, but that is me. The part of me that doesn't like me is me. It's like, oh my goodness, there's like 7 of you now. As you sit back as a consciousness and listen to this, and this is a wonderful exercise, and we should talk about this, but you can sit back and listen to the voices in your head and realize, I think we said this in a show a long time ago, that who's listening? You just say that to yourself once in a while. Say, well, all these voices in my head, who's listening? Who's listening to the voices? That's you. That's the real you. Listening to all the noise in the room. And sort of sitting there extremely quiet in the corner, observing this chaos sometimes. And sometimes not knowing what to do about it. The consciousness is very, very quiescent. But it's there. It's pervasive. It's all encompassing. But you have to encourage it to come up again. And I think Tully talks about it being the awakening of consciousness, the presence, to imbue yourself with that presence, and then realize that all the other noise in the room is only because you let it be there.
Well, again, to truly embrace all of who you are. And most people, in general, you're encouraged to find out who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know that phrase. Gee, I don't know who I am.
I don't know who I am. There's like 5 people in that conversation.
Right.
Will you tell me who I am? Hold on.
Right. But that's the search. And most people say, well, isn't that the purpose of my life? Yes. But when you realize that there is a part of you that just wants to stay in control and feed you what it wants you to believe, that it is the most important thing, and you should always listen to it being your ego.
Yeah.
When you realize that part is your ego, you also realize that it is exceedingly limited in who you actually are. This is a portion of you.
A box.
And when you realize that it's a portion, there is a whole vastness that it's trying to get you not to look at. Because if you embrace that vastness, it immediately finds itself not in the center of it all. And it likes the power that comes when you concentrate on ego and what you think your ego is. And all the myselves that you decide to set up. Loves that. Not saying that your ego is evil.
No, far from it.
But what I'm saying is it is a part of you. It is not the whole of you. And to understand that, frankly, the ego is almost like a small child that just needs to know it belongs to this larger being that is you, and it has its appropriate place. Kind of reminds you of when children are kind of running the family instead of parents running the family, and everything becomes super random. And kids actually want to have defined boundaries. They may balk, but they are happier when they know where the defined boundaries are.
Right. I mean, and that, of course, but I wanted to go back to what you were saying. You know, you mentioned earlier in the conversation that the ego will, let's say, offer this bargain. I can protect you. You know, the consciousness discovers that life is not all wonderful. The ego kind of rises up and says, well, we'll hide this way. We'll avoid fear. We'll gather power. We'll gather money and control, and people will like us, and we'll have 1,000 million likes on our webpage, and everything will be wonderful. And the interesting thing about this Faustian bargain is the ego never fulfills it, in the sense that it's never always wonderful, and it's never satisfied with where it is. It's always the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. It's also not fulfilling, and this is where you get people throughout their whole lives listening to the ego and all the me's, coming to what always is referred to as this midlife crisis. And they say the same phrase, what is the meaning of my life? You know, why am I here? And all the me's and the ego will all rise up and tell you all the things and say, well, we need to do the bucket list, and there's 500 other things we have to do, and if only this and if only that. Because that cacophony is to cover up the fact that the consciousness realizes that there is truly been a lack of engagement, true relationship, true experiential contact of a being to all the other beings which are in this incarnation. And that level of meaning has been denied, or at least certainly blunted or muffled, maybe is a better word,
hidden
by this ego cacophony, hidden by the cacophony. And it often, as you mentioned in the beginning, it often begins with fear, or with the ego's fear of rejection, the ego's fear of inadequacy, the ego's sort of, I don't want to be heard, I don't want to take chances, I want power, I want control.
Well, that's kind of interesting, because the rest of you is going with it because you really don't want to be hurt. Your body doesn't want to be hurt. Your emotions don't want to be hurt. Mental aspects of thinking doesn't want to be hurt. So they're sort of united in that feeling of I don't want to be hurt.
Right.
So what do? Oh, well, the egos, they're going, hey, I can handle that.
Yep.
And frankly, you look at it and go, well, okay, we'll do it that way. But you will eventually get to the point where you realize that letting the ego handle everything can bring a lot more pain than you ever thought ever existed.
Yeah, the suffering.
you can step straight into suffering because of ego-based decisions. And there's a part of you that knows that, you know what, that's not right. It's just not right. You know, why am I even thinking of doing that just to avoid it? It's like, but that's not right. It's going to come back and bite me hard if I do it that way. The projected myself way, this myself. And the interesting thing is that the ego will sacrifice those myselfs, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
They're sacrifice.
Expendable.
Yeah, they will sacrifice them like pawns in a chess game. Oh, yes, oh, no. And, you know, oh, well, you know, it didn't work out that much. But there's a part of you that got hurt. And you're flushing it. You're just discarding it as if it was useless.
And there are others involved here, too. I mean, this is where you see relationships where the ego, you know, and we talked about narcissism, but there's a clinical definition of narcissism. And part of that is this assumption of so many overt external personae and, you know, using them to manipulate, using them to stave off perceived threats, to you know, to capture the attention of others and other beings in your life, to subjugate and put yourself in a superior position, to gaslight people and so on. This type of behavior is the ego writ large, and subsuming the external persona into something which is manipulative and jealous and spiteful and all these things. In the name of, because that's what the narcissist was, in the name of control and power and safety, and, you know, you have to do this and you must do that, and it's very extremely clinically, you know, psychotically controlling, and that's the true, let's say, end game of narcissist. And what is wrapped around that in 100 layers is suffering. You're suffering. Everyone around you is suffering. I was reading a little bit about this, and they say narcissists don't have relationships; they take prisoners.
Yes.
You know.
Yes, they do.
You know,
oh my goodness, that was succinct.
It's very succinct. It's beautifully put, and I said this is a wonderful, because that's what happens if you're in a relationship with someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder. You are a prisoner.
And there's nothing you can do. I mean, and I've seen this where it's generational. It may start with a grandparent or a great-grandparent, and that parenting style of fear and inadequacy was taught from one generation to another.
Do this for me, and
well, just that, you know, you if you love me, you'll do this.
Exactly. If you love me is a wonderful. That's the phrase. If you love me, you'll do this for me.
And there's it never ends with this. If you love me, you do this. Because the consideration is never a two-way street. No. It's only what the narcissist wants. So the conditions are always there. And the unconditional love that is usually at the core of a family may not be there. Again, maybe it's a conditional love, but at least you have some kind of a relationship, some love. It's very hard when there is no touch point at all. There's no care for you. You know, as long as you're there and you're doing what I tell you to do, that's fine.
Right.
Like you're a performing dog.
Well, and you've been objectified in the narcissists, in the prison, and that's an overt expression of the prison of narcissism. But this happens, and it can start within this ego me selves, you know, the ego and the me selves, within the narcissist's own consciousness, and then it you know, it subsumes that and looks for more. It grows.
It's difficult when a whole culture or society leans toward narcissistic tendencies to different members of the group.
True.
For instance, in some of the other civilizations, older ones, the male is always given
deference.
Yes, you always defer to them, whatever it is, no matter how wrong.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and you can never call them on it either.
Yes, this is, and you have to give in. And it's just truly amazing. It's a what is that term? Where the female is always given over to the male.
I don't know, Ma.
Oh, never mind. It'll come to me.
It'll come.
But to understand that in a culture like that, that tendency was taught over and over and over again. And you see it in China right now, where they do not go against what is considered the dominant male authority. If the authority says this, then you're supposed to do it.
Well, I mean, culturally, maybe we ought to take a little break, but culturally, you can inculcate narcissism within a person, and then it finds root, and it turns into this internal dialogue. But we've been so self-absorbed that we've blown right past the bottom of the hour. So let's take a little break, go back to the studio, listen to some other narcissistic messages, and we'll come back.
Batman Gets Out of Bed is the latest book from Michael Lyons, the award-winning author of There is a Reaper. Featuring 13 original stories, this wide-ranging collection has everything. Forbidden love, gods versus demigods, weird invading aliens, sexy seductive artificial intelligence, and unusual passion between the living and the dead. All set amidst fantastic worlds of pain and loss and boundless joy. From the sublime to the macabre to the bittersweet, The Fat Man Gets Out of Bed will leave you breathless with laughter, brimming with tears, trembling with suspense. Available now on Amazon.com, Google Play, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere.
Moonstones and murder. Real murderers need a heart of stone. Meet Maggie and Mike Heartstone, parents of twin boys, entrepreneurs, and now empty nesters. Mike is retired, not by choice, from his position as chief of police in the picturesque resort town of Hamilton. And now his wife Maggie and her shop, the Cozy Crystal, are their only source of income. When a mysterious killing interrupts Hamilton's famous Springfield Park rock show, the townsfolk, the Cozy Crystal, and their lives are rocked to the core. Can Mike and Maggie figure out who is behind the murderous deeds before the town comes crashing down around them? A touch of romance, a little mayhem, and a whole lot of suspense, along with plenty of comedy and thrills galore. Get your crystal magnifying glass out. It's time for some moonstones and murder. Available on Amazon, Apple, Kobo, and other fine e-tailers in ebook and paperback. Out soon on Audible. Get your copy today.
Rick Riordan fans, love mythology with plenty of action and humor? Destroyer's Blood is for you. The new fantasy novel by award-winning author Michael Lyons is book 1 of the adventures of Dev Kalian, the Blood series. Follow Dev and his magic sword Betrayer as they are suddenly attacked and forced to return to Olympus to fight in a war they want no part in. The world of men and gods is about to be destroyed by Zeus's ancient foe, and only Dev and Trey can stop him. The conflict never stops, and the amazing twist will have you on the edge of your seat. Act now while the ebook is on sale for only 99 cents. Destroyer's Blood is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, Kobo, and fine e-tailers everywhere. And while you're there, get the free prequel, It's in the Blood, available for a limited time. The wait is over. First Blood, Book 2 of the Blood series is out. Your favorite bad boy thief Dev is back, and the beautiful and deadly Trey is right there with him. She is sharp, sexy, and full of surprises. Their adventures continue as a new power arises to threaten the world. The heart of creation is under attack, and time is definitely not on their side, as they battle against their enemies' undead hordes. Can they unlock the hidden power that can defeat him, or will his forces draw first blood? Get all 3 installments in the series. Book 0, It's in the Blood. Book 1, Destroyer's Blood, and the new release, Book 2, First Blood, today. Available in ebook and paperback format on Amazon, Kobo, Apple, and most other fine e-tailers.
There is a Reaper is the story of 5-year-old Christopher Aaron and his life-changing struggle with leukemia. Winner of both the Indie Bragg Medallion as well as the reader's favorite silver medal for memoir. There is a Reaper has more than 100 Amazon book reviews and a 5-star rating. It has been described as life-changing, spiritual, a must-read. Just released on Audible and iTunes, this memoir is also available in paperback and on Amazon Kindle for only 99 cents. Get your copy of this life-changing memoir today.
Hi, this is William B. Davis, the actor who plays the Smoking Man, or did play the Smoking Man on The X-Files. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and I am delighted to tell you that you are listening to the ArtistFirst radio network.
Thanks for joining us on The Soul of the Everyman on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. Back to your hosts, Michael and Margaret Lyons.
Thank you very much, Z-Man. We are talking about the prison of narcissism tonight, which it's a very it's sort of an all-encompassing sort of topic, because you can find examples of this throughout. I think there's some really wonderful work that people have done on YouTube. Some people who are clinical psychologists, and some people who are, various types of therapists, who are talking about, some of the narcissistic behavior. And I think our current society, you mentioned China inculcating sort of narcissism of a certain sort, but I would say that we're not far behind, and maybe not in the same sort of old world, deferring to the male or whatever, but the level of navel gazing, if you will, that is not only acceptable but sort of encouraged, and the sort of incredible obsession with self and self-image, and very much encouraged, or at least given a very fertile medium to grow in the social media arena. This is where your me's, your internal ego creation personae, can find a very expansive external playground, and people are through the agency of this ego and this ability to put personae out into the electronic world, if you will, at least for the gaming world. Have found this to be, I think, a reinforcing kind of feedback loop. Oh yeah, my personae is getting all these likes, and it's kind of taking people over a bit.
Well, it's narrowing down people's interpersonal relationships to this avatar, and then the interaction with one avatar to another. And most people know that this is not the true person. That's what I found. There's a whole generation that realizes that there's a lot of phony going on. And they are quite averse to this. They are looking for what is real. In fact, when they encounter a person who is not playing through an avatar, in other words, this person is exactly who you see. There's no difference. They become intrigued. Okay, this is very interesting to observe. They're intrigued by a person who is not, when your outward facade is one thing and your inward is something different. What's the word for that?
No, well, you said phony. I think that's a good word. I mean, but you're kind of hiding behind a persona.
Sorry, guys, my mind is going blank today. You are completely who you project.
Right.
You are not projecting some other face. It's just you. And as I said, when the young ones or the younger ones encounter someone who's real, I call it being real, they are very taken by that because they look at you like, how do you do that?
Right. I mean, it takes a certain amount of if you just even speaking from the point of view of
dissonance. That's the word.
Oh, okay. No, they're not dissonant.
You are not projecting any kind of dissonance.
Right.
What's outside is exactly what's inside.
Yeah, but I think what you said, keeping it real in essence, owning yourself, or even if it's not in the light of consciousness, but it is a reflection of who you are. And we used to call it, I mean, I'm going to say that it used to be that you could trust this person, or this person wasn't blowing smoke up a certain orifice, or it wasn't, somebody who wasn't a phony. And you could say, look, I spoke to so-and-so, and I got a good vibe from them. And they gave me, I could tell that, I liked what I heard. And then when I kind of went a little deeper and talked to other people, it's like, this is the kind of person that they are. What you see is what you get. Your little Italian nanny was like that. There was nothing hidden. If Nanny loved you, she loved you to the end of time. Mm-hmm. If she thought you were a jerk, you were a jerk, and you knew it. She didn't pretend. She didn't tell you one thing to your face and another thing behind your back. And they used to call it two-faced. That was the other thing. Is you would be two-faced. You would be all smiles and up front and saying how wonderful everything is, and behind your back, all these disciplines, that's terrible. I don't know to talk about them. You run into people who are up front, and even if they're not, the most, you don't get along with them. They're not the most copacetic people in the world, but at least they're straight. You get the story from them. It's their point of view. It's not necessarily what you would say or what you would do, but they stick to it. They're honest about it. They're saying, look, this is what I want, and this is how I want it.
Consistent.
And it's not narcissistic in saying, well, I'm going to manipulate you to get it. I'm going to tell you whatever story you want to hear to get it.
Right.
This is politicians 101, right? Every one of them tells you a story because they want you to do something so that they get what they want. And this is, 100% narcissistic behavior, whether it's true narcissism clinically or not. But that kind of getting over on people, of selling them a line and then getting them to do something, a con man type of arrangement, is a, if you find it on social media, it's rife, and I think the person who doesn't give that vibe will stand out in this current age because it's so prevalent. You become so jaded that everything you see you distrust Because you say, well, this is just somebody's line of CRAP, you know?
Well, it's interesting because a lot of young ones believe that I'm going to put a persona out there, and the persona that gets the most likes, that's who I'm going to be.
Right.
And they don't understand that is just a creation on their part. It's nothing to do with who they actually are in full. It's just a small piece.
And it's that ego voice, you know, oh, I'll change this, I'll change that, I'll destroy that one, and I'll make a new one. You know, try multiple different personae until it seems to get what you want, but it's never what you wanted, you know, because then you'll have these crises of identity. Oh, they only love me because they think I'm this. You know, that's the everyone loves you. It's going to no, they only love me because they think, they believe the lie. Because in your heart's level, at your consciousness level, at your being level, you know you're not what you're saying you are.
Well, that's the thing.
There's the dissonance, right?
Yeah. That's the thing. You realize that you're not happy, even though you may have some phenomenal amount of likes, because these people are not really engaging with you. They're engaging with a creation that you've put forth.
What's the phrase that they always say? They don't like me for who I am. They only like me because, you know, I have money, or I have power, or I have this, or I have that, and this is the lament. Yeah.
And objects, things in general, will never satisfy. People don't have real relationships with a thing. They try to.
Yeah.
And it's very empty.
Exactly.
Because that ego voice says, okay, I have this now, I'm somebody. Well, what does that somebody mean? Does it mean that people like you? They may not like you. Does it mean that, okay, you have this thing that is rare, but nobody cares? Or, you know, you're making a lot of money. Okay, that's nice, but you can't interact with another person intimately. You always just keep putting forth this creation that makes money.
I mean, that's exactly it. These things are empty. You know, it's a good moment to, we kind of had this beautiful quote from Deepak Chopra, who's our go-to person after Eckhart. Maybe this kind of fits in here nicely.
Okay. You want me to read?
Yeah, would you?
Yeah.
Thank you.
The ego, however, is not who you really are. The ego is your self-image. It's your social mask. It is the role you are playing. Your social mask thrives on approval. It wants control, and it is sustained by power because it lives in fear. Deepak Chopra.
And that captures what we're talking about really succinctly.
Yeah.
Because, you know, that it lives in fear. And this is interesting because Deepak does exactly what we say. It's an entity.
Right.
You know, the ego itself is a construct. And it sort of was given permission by the consciousness. The consciousness still is the being, no matter what. The ego cannot exist or subsist on anything else but the fuel of the consciousness.
It would be good if you can image your consciousness as the field of being, the field of play. And your ego wants center stage in that field. And the only way it can exist is if you engage with your ego. You say, yes, okay, you can have that piece. But your consciousness is vast, and the ego cannot exist by itself. And that's a big revelation. Your ego cannot exist by itself. It must engage in that field of being with you. And you give it the power to exist in this world, as well as the permission to take control of some part of your field or all of your field. You decide. There's no one else that can decide for you. And to realize that you have that ability, your being is so immense that this ego makes up a whole bunch of myselfs, all these different faces, persona, avatars. But unless you engage with the avatar or persona or the myself piece, it can't exist on the field of play.
I like the way you said field of play, because a good way to relate it to those who are gamers is you're the game. You're the whole game. And within that game, there are personae, egos, there are myselves, NPCs, those guys. And there's, there are all these, and it's fun to watch it, to engage with it, play with it. But at the end of the day, the game is the universe, and you are the universe. Each one of us has a universe within us. Each one of our consciousnesses contains the universe, not the other way around. And in that universe, which is all that you can perceive, there are these egos. There's and they can become toxic, so they call some pain bodies at that point. But they're all egos. They're all constructs. They're all vying for your attention as the being, because that's what they live on. That's their food.
That's their lifeline.
That's their lifeline.
They cannot exist unless you decide to engage with them. So to take that position, to understand who you are, this is the beginning of understanding who you actually are.
You're really alpha.
As a being. You contain the creative force and energy within you to choose, to decide to participate or not, to allow a certain tendency or persona or not, because you can choose otherwise. You may have done this habit all the way through your whole life, but when you realize that, wait a minute, I can choose something else because it's you. You decide. This truly is the foundation of being, and you're stepping onto exploring who you actually are.
Yeah.
And what being actually means.
Very, very, very true. That being state, that consciousness state that you fall into, that you are, has the ability to clear the field at any time.
Yes.
And the ego strives constantly to keep you either asleep or unaware. And the gaps between the ego's yelling or chatting or talking or observing or look over here, look over there, squirrel, these gaps are where you say, there was one thought and then there was another. This is Tolle's way of doing it. And what happened in between the thoughts? There was no thought. There was nothing. Did I cease existing? Did I? No. I'm still here. I still exist. And then the stillness, the vastness, he says, go out into nature. Find something that just stuns the ego into silence for just an instant and realize that you still exist, despite the fact that the ego tells you, I am you. But when the ego is absent, silent, stunned, you still exist. The presence. And when it starts to arise, the ego gets crazy. The ego is like, no, 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 no. Look over here, look over there. We can't do this, we can't do this. In the vastness, you just pull yourself out of the game. Pull the game even wider and wider and wider. Do what the kids do, which is this sort of, they go into God view, right? They go way, way, way up, away from their constructed world. So looking down and seeing the whole thing. And everything's small. All the voices are stilled. This is you. You have the whole world, the whole universe, the whole game. You're the game. You're the whole game.
And the point I'd like to bring out is when you are in this world, you're interacting in this world, and you have another person who you are in relationship with. And let's say that relationship went bad. Okay, something. And it feels like a piece of you is taken away because of the outcome of this bad relationship. I want you to understand that you can claim that piece back. Because what is yours is always yours. You may have allowed yourself to give that piece to another person for a period of time. But what is yours is always yours. You can call it back to you. And because you had given it because you were in this playing field, and you make the rules. And I believe we have reached the end of our hour.
That's the rules.
So, I'm Margaret.
And I am Michael.
And thank you for listening.